we'll be looking at schedule.
Welcome everybody to our study session today. Today is Tuesday, December 12th, 2023. It's 4:51 p.m. We're convened as the Provo City School District Board of Education. We're meeting at 280 West 940 North in Provo, Utah, and we're going to begin this meeting today with a roll call. I am Rebecca Nielsen, the board president.
Jennifer Cartridge, vice president.
Melanie Hall, board member. Lisa Boyce, board member.
Meg Van Wagenen, board member.
Max Joyner, student member.
Will Widener, student member.
Gina Hales, board member.
Perry McCabe, board member.
Derek Anderson, business administrator.
Good timing.
Wendy Dow, superintendent.
All right, thank you for everyone who's here and for everyone who's in our audience and everyone who's watching online. We appreciate everyone's attendance today. We're going to start now with a motion to convene our study session.
I move that we convene the study session.
Thank you so much. Motion made by Board Member Hales. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Hall. Official. We are now in
Winner.
our study session. All right, we're going to start today with the board handbook training given by Board Member Gina Hales.
Okay, this will be fast, even though we're going to cover a lot of good stuff. So, we'll go to the next one. Basically, it's relationships and protocol, page 8. I basically just cut and pasted in here, and I highlighted the things that I think are important. So, agenda development in red and pink. The board president, board vice president, superintendent should develop board meeting agendas collaboratively. I think that's important for the board members, but the superintendent is over the actual day-to-day operations, and so it's good that it needs to be collaborative. Some of this I did not know until I was almost a year on the board. But any board member may request that a topic be placed on an upcoming meeting agenda. And I just want to say that I very much appreciate the newish system that we have with the spreadsheet that we can put things down and second it and third it and whatever needs to happen. I appreciate that because it wasn't always as clear what the processes were. And then if three or more board members join in requesting that a topic be placed on the agenda, the request will be accommodated. Maybe not right then, but it will be accommodated. So I like it. Had I read the board handbook when I was supposed to, maybe it wouldn't have been so frustrating for me. So, okay, next. All right, so if we get complaints, there are two separate sections, but they're exactly the same except one word, which is the patron employee in the second line there. But I really like that it says when you receive a complaint, you should listen carefully. So listen carefully, people. And then the next part, a single board member may respond to the patron employee only as an individual. And I try to be very careful. This was hammered into my head when I first came in, and it's just, I think it's common sense. I usually will say that here's my opinion, I am 1 in 7. Just to make it really clear. And then once you've responded, you need to make sure that in there you're directing the person to solve the problem by communicating with the individuals at the level where the problem originated. I can't tell you how many times I've been in meetings with legislators who have people coming to them, but they didn't go to the teacher, they didn't go to the principal, they didn't go to the superintendent, they didn't go to any of that, and it's frustrating for me when that happens because it's like I could have helped them. It didn't need to go straight to a legislator, and I think we should be able to help people understand what's the process. I think a lot of times people just don't know the process, and if we can help them understand the process, and I often will say, okay, here's what I think you need to do, go back to the principal or whatever. If you don't get where you need to go, let me know and I will help you get the right place. But I try not to solve the problem for them unless it actually is a board issue, because it's not my place, right? And then, so yeah, before escalating to the next appropriate level, I have to say those were my italics and bold. Okay, next. And that's for both the community and for employees if you receive complaints. All right, individuals and groups seeking an audience with the board during public meetings. So if someone wants to promote a business opportunity or political point of view, it will usually be denied, which I agree with that. It should be. That should be a whole other forum. And then these individuals and groups, however, may speak to the board in a public comment portion, which I believe is what belongs. So, okay, next. And then professional development. The board supports targeted, relevant professional development. And I really like that. And I would like to add, like, effective. I've been to professional development. I've actually been very pleased with the board professional development that I have participated in, but in my other professional life, they're not always super effective. Not that we're going to put that in there. But we support that. We want people to have development in their professions. And I really like the next part that's highlighted. The board models this commitment, and the way that we model that is we go to the USBA conferences in January, and we've also been going to the NSBA conferences, the national conferences. And I will tell you, I get something out of both of those conferences, and they're very different. But I, as a board member, feel that I improve every time I go to those, and that is not always the case when I go to conferences. And then professional development is easiest to support when it is aligned and consistent with the accomplishment of board and district goals. And I feel like we're working on getting those more clear with our strategic plan, and that it'll be easier to make things align at that point. So that is the rest of that section that we had.
Okay, thank you so much, Gina. Anybody have any questions or comments?
I can't answer them, but you can ask.
Related to our board training today. Okay, thank you, Gina. We appreciate your work on that. All right, item number 5 on our agenda today is a construction update with Derek Anderson.
All right, I'm going to project this, and then I'm going to actually turn the time over to Chad to let him read it or so.
Good evening.
Hi.
All right, come on.
Go through this quick. Tint view, starting with tint view, the big news is we have students in the space. Yeah, next one. So the academic wing is open. This is the media center up here that's open on that other side. The learning stair, they got the lights tested. They're still putting in the glass that's going to go in front of that. So that's going to get closer to completion. The glass, timing to cut that is pushing that to mid-January when that's going to be complete, and have that media center open all the way down that stair. Next one. Other work that's still ongoing out there, the concessions building. It's been, the block is done on it. Same with the next one, the bleacher building. They got the roof on. This is the footings for the bleachers, the steel that's going to start going up within the next month. That's going to take some time. That's going to be probably July when that's complete. Any questions on Tinview?
Could a
Demolition.
bad winter slow that down, or is that already kind of?
Not that
forecast?
part, not the bleacher part, no. Demolition should be starting on the old academic portion first part of January. We're going through abatement. So far, the asbestos that we found has not been too bad, so we should be good with, if we do find certain friable materials, we need to do a 10-day notice and wait for that period. Have not found any. They did start today, have not found any of that yet.
So there was asbestos in the old academic wing.
Oh,
Yes.
definitely. There's definitely asbestos in the old academic area.
The school I worked at in Texas had a high number of teachers with cancer.
Did
And
it
guess
really?
what happened over Christmas break? They found asbestos in the school. So,
But you said not
Let's
a
just-
ton.
There's non-friable and friable, meaning that it can be airborne,
Yes,
basically.
yes,
Okay.
there we go.
And as long as it's not something airborne, if it's an adhesive that is not airborne, when they're demolishing it, dust and powders can come up. As long as it's not that, they can get rid of it without reporting to the state.
And what they found is so far is
So far is
non-friable?
Yes.
I love that term. I'm starting using it. Non-friable.
You know, I have to say, I went to the open house last night. I went to the old part and then the new. And wow, it makes
Yes.
you really appreciative of the new part. You didn't realize how, I mean, we take good care of our buildings, but honestly we do for
Yeah.
the most part. But that old part really, I didn't realize how bad it really was. So.
So the next few weeks will be the rest of the abatement, doing the shut-off, utility shut-offs, and getting ready to start demolition first part of January. Wasatch is going well as well. We did start to have some problems. We were starting to experience some delays on the block being delivered, enough to keep going. That's been resolved. We got the block. This is looking in out the front door, so this is coming out the front elevation, the first floor. That front entrance here kind of wraps around, and it's going to be 3 stories up here above that. Steel was a big milestone. We started getting steel in last week. Our goal and the concern that I had with the block is having enough to stay ahead of the steel so that the steel guys don't have to leave and continue right behind them. So that's our target, that's our plan, to keep them moving without having to leave and come back. Just another corner elevation starting to get up into the second level. This is a monster of a stair down on Locust Lane that comes down from the road going up. So
Wait, hold on.
got
Okay.
that board. It's not going to look bad. It's going to be filled in, so you won't see it like that.
Oh, wow.
But that's the stair coming up from the road up to the front of the building.
Was that the section in the front of the retaining wall that was left
Yes.
open, right?
Yep.
Okay.
That's it.
Got it.
The
Okay.
area where it all washed out.
Yeah. It's huge.
Just kidding.
And then this is a drone video.
Oh,
So all the walls are completely done over here. They're now going to start, we've got everything coordinated with the city on light poles and what happens if they're on that street level. That's all done. So now we'll start to see the fencing going up along there. Yeah, you can see here, that's the steel, where the steel is started over on that side. Then they're just going to work over to this side. Block is already starting to go up on the second level up here, so then they'll come back and start from that side back this way.
Where are those stairs?
The stairs were, they're
Yeah.
over there in the front.
That's the second level we're looking at for that slab, right?
Correct.
Okay.
that elevation right there, that is gonna be the gymnasium.
This is the gymnasium, the kitchen, media center here. There's that stair.
But a really good view.
Yeah.
That's, so here's the parking lot entrance as we talked about that. This is the one parking lot entrance, and this is the bus loop, I believe, that's up here.
Right.
And along with the staff parking lot, and then the other one back here, at this view, right here, right there is where it's coming off the street, or it'll come across here, or the entrance and drop off if there's no parking.
There will always only be one entrance to the parking lot once it's done, completed?
It'll be
So there was a
the
northern
one entrance right here from the west corridor. This will be the one entrance. There is no other exit here, but it is this one entrance. And then over here towards this side also has the one entrance down here on that end.
Okay. Each parking lot has one entrance.
Correct.
So two spots, one entrance to each.
Correct.
Yes. Okay, shoreline. Shoreline's coming along. They've got this second level. This is the commons area looking one direction and the other toward the learning stair here that they have protected, heated to start doing finishes. All the roof is done except for this little portion here. Waiting to tie that in. Cafeteria space coming along. Next one. Classrooms, so on that, what direction? The east. So the east, southeast is further along. I don't have that picture, but it's got drywall. This is back in the orchestra band, the music area. It's got paint, drywall is done, starting to get the ceilings in. So that area is the furthest along. This is that is the northeast, is kind of the last wing that's being done there on the front. Starting to get drywall into that. So they passed the four-way and starting to get that closed in. The gymnasium is pretty much done. They got the basketball bankers, they got their sound attenuation here, so painted, it's pretty much done.
If you go in there, it's really quiet because
Yes.
the decking at the top is a special decking that also absorbs sound.
Absorb sound.
Other than that area where they're still finishing that decking for the roof, the roofing material, the membrane is on, mechanical equipment's in place. That's it. It's
Awesome.
Timeline, any difference in timeline on any of them since last time we talked?
no.
Cool.
I'll stay on track.
Okay. Great. All right, any questions from the board for Chad? Okay, thanks, Chad. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, item number 6, policy review. We'll give that time to Wendy.
Okay.
It should be more formal. The superintendent down.
You're just fine. So, the one policy that we have put up that will come before you in business meeting for vote is the inclusive learning environment policy, and we did get a request to add a procedure if someone felt like that this policy wasn't being upheld, then, lining out the way that should be handled. Meg, you forwarded the board an email that came from the LGBTQ plus parent committee. Do you want to highlight some of the things from that feedback? And then I think Will and Max will have some comments as well.
Okay, so I'll just kind of go through, I think obviously starting off, I think this policy's come a long way since we started in the spring. Everyone's appreciative of that. I'm appreciative of kind of shifting the approach and coming at it in a way that's really focusing on being inclusive. So I think one of the things, if we're going to the top for definitions, right, there was a suggestion to change inclusion to belonging. I think that was maybe before we had this policy as a student inclusion policy, now it's inclusive learning. So I think inclusive probably still makes sense if you're talking about a classroom. Belonging is like more a person, right? So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts about that. I'll keep going. I think there's some concern, let's see. When we talk about discrimination, it's kind of generic, treating a person or a group of people differently from other people or groups of people. Suggestion to maybe do we add like protected classes there because of beliefs, sexual orientation, gender, or any other reason. And I think if you added those, you would add potentially religion as well, right? Is that something, does anyone have any thoughts about that?
Isn't there, with the Civil Rights Act and Title IX, isn't there a very clear definition of what protected classes are?
Yeah, and they're included in the language
Yeah,
of this
they are
policy, but not in that line.
Not in the
so
definition.
So it's just you want to add them back in there.
Yes. Because yes, down the line, they are included.
Fine. Adding the full definition there, as long as we're consistent in how we, do you know what I mean?
Well, we can add it.
The sexual orientation.
All of those things.
I guess it depends what we want that word to, how we use it the rest of the time, because you can discriminate in lots of ways, whether it's against those protected classes or not. So are we trying to follow those
That's true.
protected classes, or
Well,
I mean, we
that's
don't
what
want
I
any
agree.
discrimination?
Or you could include them for any other reason.
Including but not limited to type of language,
Yeah.
right? Or, I wonder, do we want the definition to be more general so that it can be more of an umbrella over more than things that are listed, I guess? I don't know. What's typical?
Under employments, we do have the including but not limited to where is it? Under the employee expectations, gender identity, expression, civil status, family status, yeah. And I think that's definitely a broader definition by far than some of the other stuff.
I guess I just wonder, I'm just wondering, is this something we need to do? Is it for policy purposes, to protect ourselves? One of the reasons we have policy, right, is for everyone's protection. So is it going to come back and be a problem for us if we don't list it here, even though it's listed down here, or, right, I guess I'm thinking like liability type mindset here. Is it something that's necessary for protection, or is it something that is just more for,
I think it's
to be clearer, I guess?
Yeah, I think if you look at clarity as necessary, it's just being pretty clear about what we mean when we say treating people differently from other people, you know?
Right. And we do give tremendous clarity under employee expectations, so it's just a question of do we want to reiterate that right up at the top under definitions?
I don't think it's ever bound to state things.
Yeah, I don't have a problem.
That's what I
stating
think. I think it's, yeah.
But let's just make sure that
I
whatever
think
we
if the
write is
concern
consistent with all of them.
The concern is if some people just, okay, I'm just going to read these definitions, that's it. You know, like if it's in multiple spots.
Well, and it doesn't leave, I mean, it helps so that it doesn't leave room for interpretation, for people to interpret things incorrectly, right? So.
Well, I guess, does it do any harm to include it? I don't think it does, right? I don't like,
So how exactly is it going to be worded? I'm just curious. Is it going to say, for example, et cetera, you know, and list it, all protected classes?
And I guess that's up to us ultimately, right? But we could say, I mean, if we take the recommendation just as it is, the practice of unfairly treating a person or group of people differently from other people, the practice of unfairly treating a person or group of people differently because of beliefs, sexual orientation, gender, religion, or any other reason. But we probably need to add race in there too.
Well, down below it
And
says
The
just the
civil
second
status,
bullet.
gender identity, expression, civil status, family status, sexual orientation,
religion, age, disability, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and culture. You can restate all those. I would
think
say
I like keeping how it is and then adding to it. Because I think this general helps us be able to use it and interpret it in ways we may need when depending on what people feel like they're being, you know, how people feel like they're being discriminated against, I guess. But then including but not limited to with the list makes more sense to me. Yeah, with the list we have down below.
Perfect.
And I just was going to say, as you're going through these, I would love us to have this whole conversation, and then just to be transparent, I sort of think before I would feel ready to vote, I would want to see a written draft, so I might move to table the vote until it gets just like maybe policy committee writes all of our, just because I'm afraid if we're not clear on the words that we're voting on, and we say as discussed in study session, and then there was a lot of discussion.
Yeah.
And there's no, I don't think there's a huge, like, it's not something that needs to be passed this month, correct?
No, and I know that some of the feedback is that we have received is specifically tied to having a rainbow flag, for example. It is important to note that there is a bill that is sitting in the legislature right now that would actually ban that in classrooms, and so just to respond to that is we didn't put that in there because we were concerned that then all of a sudden right out of the gate our policy could be actually against state code. So
Well, and I think as soon as we start naming specific symbols, then we're going to have to list them all,
Yeah,
and
that
that's going to
was my
get
concern
cumbersome.
as well. We can't list one and not the other hundreds of flags that are out there, right?
I think just, I see what you're saying, and I agree, but I think the rationale behind wanting to include that flag, I do think for many it feels this policy, while it seems to umbrella a lot of different things, it seems to be talking about one specific flag without talking about that flag to some, right? And so I think that is the rationale for the recommendation to lay that out there in here, like a pride flag is meant to show belonging and inclusivity, right? That's the purpose of it. But I do see the rationale also. We're not going to get into we're not going to name everything. So, okay, let's see. So, I guess the question is, do you want us to keep going through this?
I think so. I think
Okay.
it's a good conversation.
Okay. Okay, the idea of personal viewpoint, right? Like, I think concerns about create the appearance, like who decides what that, is that a little bit too subjective? The idea of speech that creates the appearance of an employee advocates a particular religious or viewpoint.
Can you just specify exactly where we are?
Sorry, we're still on definition.
Definition number 5, okay.
I think concern that this is just kind of vague and redundant. If we've already talked about
So they're advocating for taking it out.
Yeah.
And
So-
what is it redundant of?
I think probably part of the public forum as a place like where describing what the public forum is, a place that belongs to tradition being used for. I guess maybe I'm not quite sure.
My understanding of that, I actually read it through several times and tried to pull them up together, is they actually have a reworking down below where we talk about schools as public forums, and rather than having schools as public forums and talking about personal viewpoints, they suggested a statement that I like the wording of that says, where you would say, where is it? Speech or actions that aim to persuade an individual to adopt personal beliefs, opinions, or affiliations is inappropriate in a classroom setting. That's just a different way of saying what we're saying about a public forum. It's just I think they just were saying that personal viewpoints could get sticky around, I don't know, that's what I thought, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, and I think also using the word creates, right? Someone may say, well, I think this creates this, I think this creates that. So the word creates, I think. And then, yes, you could replace it with speech or actions that aim to persuade an individual to adopt personal beliefs, opinions, or affiliations inappropriate in a classroom setting. So, I'm just trying to think how you incorporate that.
So that's the point of the public forum, isn't it? Section and personal viewpoint being defined clearly above, so that when you read that public forum, you know this is what we mean by personal viewpoint. So
That's correct. It's
yeah,
creating the
yes.
definition for why you have
For
public.
the statement down below.
Yes.
Yeah.
So because you list personal viewpoints in the section, schools as public forums, you have to define what is meant
Right.
by a personal viewpoint.
So, Meg, say one more time, the rewording of the beginning part of that speech that
Speech or actions that aim to persuade an individual to adopt personal beliefs, opinions, or affiliations is inappropriate in a classroom setting.
So that wouldn't go in the definition, right?
Yeah.
No, that goes down below as
No,
an
but I was
adoption. They're
just
saying
wondering, like,
remove personal
just remove
viewpoint, and
personal
then
to
viewpoint.
persuade,
and then they were saying down below you'll get to it in a minute why they said to remove it from definition. But anyway, keep going.
Well, I guess do we want to, I mean, I don't know the
Do we
best
want to
way
take
to
out
go
creates?
as
Is
we-
that what you're on personal viewpoint? Is that what they were suggesting?
Right, do we want to take personal viewpoint out of the definitions?
I think we have to leave it, right? Because I think that's
I
part of
think
the
it's
policy,
important to make
right?
sure we have the correct definition.
We
What's
might
the
even-
harm in keeping it? That's what I don't understand. What's the harm in keeping it?
It's only that they I understand, and we welcome to invite them into a conversation if we're going to continue this, but to amend the part later when they go down and talk about amending schools as public forums, first they explain why they what they see as a justification to not have that in there based on a case that they've listed here. And then down below under a couple of things down, they say to add speech or actions that aim to persuade an individual to adopt personal beliefs, opinions, or affiliations is inappropriate in a classroom setting as an alternative way to say a similar thing without potentially getting yourself into trouble around saying a classroom is not a public forum. If there's a precedent to say, actually it is. Do you know what I'm saying? That's what I understood they were trying to say here, but I might be wrong. I don't know.
I think there's a conflict between saying a school is not a public forum when this Tinker versus Des Moines Supreme Court case said, no, actually teachers and students do not check their freedom of speech at the door when they go into the school, right? So saying a school is not a public forum is maybe in conflict with that. That's how I'm reading that.
In
Whether or
terms-
not that's the case.
But I don't think it
with-
is in
So
this.
so
but-
if you
Tinker,
actually
yeah.
if you actually look at the Tinker case is suggesting that you're correct. A teacher doesn't have to give up First Amendment rights. Like, I don't have to give up my religion because I walk through the door of a school building. But I do not get to use my position to promote my viewpoint. That is the difference. So that's where we get into these really kind of grayer areas when a student, for example, is asking a teacher, say, you know, what is your view of this versus a teacher, you know, just giving that view as if it's fact. So that's what Tinker really is addressing there.
Yes.
So I mean, that's why, yes, in my mind, when I look at that, I don't feel like if a teacher has a pride flag or something in their classroom that this is in any way creating an issue. But there are other symbols that would. So anyway, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say that Tinker, the main idea is that we don't surrender our rights as long as they're not infringing on others' rights, right? So as a student, I could wear a black armband, but I couldn't be shouting during class, "No Vietnam," right? Just because that is infringing on their right to an education versus me displaying my beliefs.
So it feels like on the personal viewpoint part that what their stopping point on it, as far as I read, is that it says religious or political view. So what if we just amend that to say something about a personal viewpoint is speech that creates the appearance that an employee advocates for a particular opinion or a particular viewpoint, right? I mean, that's
Just delete the religious
or political part. And then that is a little bit more vague, but it still conveys the idea that you're not supposed to be sitting there advocating for your own particular view or pushing your own particular view on people.
So would you specifying like their own individual viewpoint or just any viewpoint? Or
their own individual, their personal.
Yeah. Okay.
I like the language the way it is, and the reason is because you don't want to think you're telling a teacher they can't have a personal viewpoint in general. So that's just my personal viewpoint on that.
Nice.
I mean, I understand, and I actually don't. I like their language around like the public forum thing, but I like that this is a definition that says when we say personal viewpoint, we're explicitly saying you're not going to stand up there and preach religion or try to influence and persuade people politically using your role as a teacher to do so.
Yeah, I worry to get.
Go ahead.
Just to get too specific, you know, do I like Twix or Reese's better? That's a personal viewpoint, and that's hopefully not
No,
controversial.
it's the right and left Twix.
That's right.
Well, okay, look, what we're trying to define is what a personal viewpoint is, and then later on we'll say you can't force your personal viewpoint on someone.
Correct.
So I think the definition is still fine. I mean, it's still fine to define your personal viewpoint is how you feel about something, and then later on we say, right? So I think it's fine not putting religious or political in there because we're just trying to define what's a viewpoint. That's the way you personally feel about something, right? And then later on we say you may not push that on people. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Well, if we're going to be, I mean, yeah, maybe though, if we are wanting to be clear up on like number 3, the discrimination definition, we should keep it in there to be clear on the personal viewpoint, as opposed to pulling back and being real vague. So maybe we do just keep it as it is.
Okay.
And then we can add in the schools as public forums, which we already do have, right? We have the speech or actions that aim to persuade individuals to adopt personal beliefs, opinions, or affiliations is inappropriate in a classroom setting.
I actually kind of like that, because that's really what we're trying, you know,
The word that I wonder about is distribution. I mean, schools including classrooms are not public forums for the display or distribution. Display or distribution is what we're trying to get across is we don't want people pushing their viewpoints on people, right? When it infringes on their rights. So does display or distribution convey that well enough?
Yeah, I think it does. But I do think when we say political, religious, or personal viewpoints, but we have defined personal viewpoints as political or religious, that maybe we just say here for the display or distribution of political, religious viewpoints. I don't know, right?
Or we can take out political and religious and just
personal
say personal viewpoints since we've already defined
Correct.
what it is.
Yeah, one or the other. Because otherwise this is a little redundant right here.
Yeah, so let's just take out political and religious and just say display and or distribution of personal viewpoints.
That gets messier if I'm a teacher. I feel like.
I would take out personal view.
Yeah, I would.
Okay.
Maybe.
Then
do
there's
the
no
other.
reason to
And then
have
the
the
definition,
Then we
right.
just delete the definition.
Yeah,
Which is
because
why
then-
their statement there makes sense, the way
But-
they reworded it.
But you kind of do need to have personal viewpoints, because
Yeah,
here's
because
the
it
issue.
can be
There
more
are
than-
viewpoints that are not necessarily tied to religion or to politics. Like abortion would be a good example of something that might not necessarily be tied to both of those things, but that's a viewpoint that's going to create a really hostile environment very quickly for a group of students if a teacher is discussing that and it isn't related to their
So can we add then to our definition something beyond just religion and politics,
Right.
right? So that, and I don't know how we add, what we add to that.
Should we
but-
do a, but, like,
We wanna
but not
say-
limited to,
Right,
like,
included in but not limited to, or
Yeah.
I mean, we could add in a controversial, I mean.
We have a separate policy
controversial
on
issues.
controversial issues that would back that up. We could even refer to that policy. I forget the numbers.
Religious or political or controversial, see policy, whatever, views, or.
is there a state definition on this, or any state laws on that?
Yeah.
on
Like-
personal viewpoint.
Like controversial or
Yeah,
personal
there's
viewpoints?
and that's why we have a policy specifically tied to the discussion of controversial issues.
So could we just use the state's definition, or?
I would have to go in and look at it. I think we
Okay.
could. So, on this, would you prefer that we rework this and then just send it to policy committee? And we don't put it up for vote, cause it seems like we're doing a
making
lot
some
of, we're
changes,
making
yeah.
quite a few
I would
changes to
prefer
this.
that.
I mean, does everybody agree with making changes?
So far, all the changes we've discussed, I'm fine with, but yeah, I think we need to see another draft before we.
I think this one's important enough that we wanna make sure the wording's correct.
Yeah, because they have a good point here around unintended consequences when we talk about displaying personal viewpoints and just being thoughtful about that.
I'm just gonna ask, do we need to have anything in here for employee expectations that they're allowed, that they can wear something on their lanyards, like that those things are okay, so that those expectations?
It would be. I mean, I think the problem is as soon as you start defining that, then are there things that they could wear on their lanyard that wouldn't be okay? I mean,
Even in like, in a previous draft, wasn't there like a little section that said something like your desk space is?
That was a long ago.
That was
Yeah.
a year
Yeah.
last
Long
year.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's,
we're steering away from that one.
several
Yeah.
iterations ago.
Yeah.
I understand that you don't wanna define that consent, but at the same time, that's also their freedom of speech, so.
I would hope that they would, I mean, I know that people are concerned that, teachers aren't gonna feel like that they have that, but I feel like that's where, in the procedure, we're trying to line out, let's have a conversation about this, like, is this, no, that really does support a teacher's, like, it's fine to have a rainbow lanyard, or it's fine to have, you know, I have a rainbow pin on this, or I have something that's tied to my religion, or I don't feel like that those are things where you are, where a reasonable person is believing that you're trying to indoctrinate somebody or something.
I like sending this back to the
Okay.
policy committee.
Okay.
I feel like there's just enough important things to make sure we've talked through. Do you wanna keep reading through though, and do you want us?
Well, I think if we're gonna read,
Seems useful.
I think we're almost through it all. So basically, if we do employee expectations, down the fifth bullet point, instead of using avoid suggesting that a student or educator's sex, race, we use never suggest that a student's, instead of avoid, because it just maybe should not ever happen.
How about do not suggest?
Do not suggest, because it's never just feel too.
It just, yeah, it feels
Yes,
big.
never. And then, last Angie, that sounds good.
The last thing I did feel like the procedure helped address.
Yes.
Right, some of that.
Yeah, I think some of the other concerns were like, well, then how is this really going to be handled, right? And I think the procedures was great, and I sent that to them, actually, so I think that addressed that. One more. I think there was just, this is one piece of feedback on the last bullet on employee expectations. It currently says, never use their positions to endorse, promote, or disparage a particular religious, denominational, sectarian, agnostic, or atheistic belief or viewpoint. And maybe the recommendation is to expand that to, let's see, this expanded the original statement. Never use their position to promote or disparage. So taking out endorse, because employees cannot endorse a group or individual's identity or belief system. They exist whether or not employees agree with them. So I think that's a technicality on the word endorse. So just have never use their position to promote or disparage. I'm not sure if I follow that totally.
I don't either, because endorse is different than promote or disparage.
Well,
And it would be problematic.
Well, I feel like that statement suggests that endorse means the same thing as existence, and that's not the case. Endorse means that I'm agreeing with this, or I am promoting this. I am suggesting that this is superior to something else, and so I don't necessarily agree with that particular statement.
I think we can take it to, and then I may have you attend that one so that you can attend in my place as we can help put this together.
From the student side, I've talked to a lot of students about this, and hopefully some of them will give public comments today. I know we talked about that in the most recent district student council. First thing, what does it mean to advocate? It says that they will not advocate for it. So making it more clear as to that if a teacher is advocating for a specific viewpoint, that's not permissible. If they talk about their viewpoints and display it without advocating it, such as, well, my personal beliefs are this versus your grade is tied to whether or not you agree with me, and making that more clear.
That's the definition.
Yeah. And almost every student I've talked to immediately sees this as a policy to ban pride flags, which I don't know how we fix, but if there's a way we can make it more clear, this is about protecting students in the classroom, not anything to do with pride flags necessarily, but students, when they look at this, do often just see, oh, they're trying to ban pride flags.
And hopefully that's an advocacy piece you could take a really active role in, because this policy is written in such a lovely way to not be that. So if you read and understand it, I mean, we have a lot of groups of people who feel like they are underrepresented for a lot of different reasons, and what we want is to make sure we all are doing the work to create a space where someone's safe to speak up, where someone feels like they can advocate for or ask a question for something about, their experience in that setting. And we want teachers, ourselves, students to be mindful of what does it mean to be respectful, to share space and be learners together, right? And that's going to include a wide range of people and a lot of different lived experiences, and we have to be committed to it. And we want teachers committed to it, we want ourselves committed to it, we want students committed to it. So actually, if you could help them understand that's what this policy is about. I know there's a fear response, because in the past there were past policies and things to worry about, but hopefully you can advocate for the mean being in this.
I've definitely sent a few emails. So like people have emailed me saying, I've heard about this policy to ban pride flags. And then I respond, this policy does not ban pride flags.
I think I would really, never mind. question like your reading comprehension
I
and
would
your
too.
inference skills, if that's what you're reading in
Then
this
you're going to
policy. On the contrary.
misinformation skills.
Maybe they're
Or
not
they're
reading, maybe
confusing
they're
with
just
They're just-
relying on the
yeah.
information they're
Mhm.
hearing from other
Or
people.
maybe
I don't
they're
think
looking
they've
at
read it.
state
Yeah.
classroom neutral.
Yeah, that's a great opportunity to share,
Yeah.
like, hey, I often hear things that make me feel really concerned because they matter to me. And then when I look at the sources and I go and I try to find the real information, it helps, and you could offer them
Yeah.
a link to how to find that.
And you compare this policy to how a lot of other district policies look like. Other district policies are very defined in terms of what is allowed and what is not allowed, and they are policies to ban specific things in
Mhm.
classrooms. That is not how that was not the spirit of this policy at all.
Mhm.
The spirit of this policy is to create dialogue, to understand that we're coming from we have different perspectives and we're coming with different backgrounds, and we want to make sure that people feel safe at school and feel included. And so how do we do that? You do that by sitting down with people and having a conversation about what that looks like in many cases.
I agree with Lisa too. I think what you're hearing is a fear response, because if this policy were created, like you're saying, the armbands, right,
Mhm.
during the Vietnam War, then people would have said, oh, they're trying to ban armbands.
Yeah.
Right, then so it's just, that's not, this is general
I'm glad
enough,
people care.
broad enough
Yeah.
that it should
Right.
hopefully stand the test of time and not be specific to just pride flags, and that issue may change in 20 years, right? And
Mhm.
everyone's gonna be on the table, so.
Be the Crocs shoes.
We're trying to ban Crocs. We should have already done that policy.
I guess, and I would say, like, pride flags are probably more necessarily a concern and issue, right? I do think the LGBTQ community doesn't feel like their existence is an issue, right? And I know it's, but that it's the concern that we need to continue to help those in our schools and our families in that community know that they belong. And I think, I think especially from where we were in the spring to here, how much care and thought has gone into this policy is the spirit of what Wendy was speaking to. Yeah, this is to really try to encourage that dialogue so that we can all belong. So.
My other policy is not really a policy, it's a procedure that is required by state law. We were talking about, we have a policy for teacher-student success account guidelines, and then we have to have a procedure for how that funding goes forth. So we just pulled that from the model policy that exists at the state. And then we have addressed this with the fact that our school plans will be addressing TSSA very specifically as they have in the past, but we'll have that all lined out so that it's very clear what the money is going towards and how it's supporting overall the school improvement plan. So we'll kind of talk more about that in a little bit, but just wanted you to be aware of that procedure.
There's a deadline on this one? The PSS?
It's a procedure, so it doesn't need it, so the policy's already in place. I just wanted to notify you of the procedure, so there's no vote on the actual procedure itself, so. Judy and Karen, you guys are up for 40, 20, and 40, oh my goodness.
40-40.
Yes. 40, 20, here we go.
So I believe this is the second read of 4020. So we are making some updates to 4020 to address current Utah code, some clarification changes just to make things clear, and also some title changes to be updated. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Are there any questions for Judy for 4020?
Is that the one where we
Did
got?
you get some input on that?
Yes.
And did you see that input? I don't know if it got forwarded to her, but the input was around deleting as outlined by parents and community. The stakeholder was concerned about kind of pulling parents out, but I feel like the language you've done here with input by parents and community clarifies that that input will be valued in the curriculum.
Absolutely.
But it's not a case of parents developing curriculum and outlining it for adoption. Exactly. I mean, is that the one you're referring
Yep,
to?
that was the one I would, just wanna make sure that parent, that we are.
Yeah, and I'm grateful for their concern, because that is important.
We did have another feedback that just wanted to make sure we are including teachers in that. I wasn't clear. She was suggesting we wanted language right there to include with input by parents, community, and teachers.
Okay.
Or we thought it.
Parents, teachers, and community.
Are teachers implied in the community?
And I feel like when it goes out, so first off, teachers are kind of chosen to be representatives, and then they go and speak with their principals as you're adopting different curricula, right? So then the idea is that teachers could speak to those individuals and provide feedback, and then when it does, you know, when it is put out for public review, a teacher can go in and review that. There's no and provide feedback at that point. Did they just want, I mean, I'm guessing they just wanted that stated more deliberately.
There was the other feedback too from Suzanne about
That's
the
the
community. Oh.
No, it's this one, actually, you're right. It
Yeah,
is this
it's
one.
4020.
Yeah, it's on the procedure
About the
of this policy.
What row are you
Oh, is
looking
it
at?
procedure?
Yeah, it's on the procedure. She was just raising, and I thought that was really great input, that when you do the procedure around your 3-year curriculum cycle, that in your second year, you are developing a rubric for then trying to get people to come in and show different curriculum, right?
Right.
She was saying, what if at the end of that first year, based on just the timeline of being on the ELA talk committee right now, it was that at the end of the first year, if you decide you need to come up with new curriculum, that the rubric is created at the end of that first year, so that your
more time
significant part of your second year is in looking at and really getting into your different choices. That was just a suggestion, so that would be fun.
Which wouldn't necessarily go into the policy, just
Right,
a
but it's not,
consideration, right?
but just
Yeah.
passing that along.
Yeah, yeah, that's good feedback.
Maybe we need to forward that on to these two. And by we, I mean someone besides me.
So are we deciding we want to add teachers in there with input by parents, community, and teachers, or not?
I think it's a good idea.
I like the idea,
We
because
do
we do
want
have teachers
teacher
on the,
input,
we
yeah.
typically have them on the committees, right?
Yeah, the committees are primarily teachers.
Okay.
So parents, comma, teachers, comma, community?
Yeah.
Please use Oxford comments.
Oh, very
That's so controversial.
It's a thing, it's a thing for Terry. It's a thing for a lot of us.
Just use switch semicolons.
Okay. As long as Oxford commas are consistent with the language used in the policy, right?
That's appropriate.
Right.
I said please.
I'm just teasing them.
This is great, thank you so much. No.
Yeah, okay, any other questions for Judy on 4020? Okay.
All right, again, it's the second read for 4040 as well. Minor changes to the title change. There's correction of title. There's addition of the term salary advancement. That's consistent with what we now call what used to be name change. Those are the main things that were quite minor.
Okay. Any questions on this policy from the board for Karen? No? Okay. Thank you.
We haven't had any feedback from this one
I
either.
don't think so, right? All right.
Hey, Derek, go over your policy.
All right, tax increment financing, second reading. The only feedback that was, oh, I did not attach the correct one, I apologize. The feedback that I was given, and I changed it on apparently one of the drafts, but not this draft, is that in item number 3, the second grouping of item number 3, where it says an opinion, that needs to be changed to just an analysis.
It has been changed, right? We just have the wrong draft.
Yes,
Right.
correct. And so, as we adopt this one tonight, I would just ask that we adopt it with that change in the policy. And so that way it's approved tonight, and then it's uploaded with the correct verbiage.
All right, any questions for Derek on the TIF policy?
Second reading, right?
Yep. So it said, so just to be clear, second reading on 4020 and 4040, there will be a vote on that. I think we've already kind of determined that we're going to table the inclusive learning one. This is the second reading on the TIF policy. There will be a vote on that.
So there's another policy that is before you, which is the
E-bike scooter.
E-transportation and self-propelled policies.
Apparently, I attached the wrong one on this one too.
There are so many different versions of everything.
I
Yes.
sent the right one,
Yeah,
and
but I
you went
sent
in
the
and
good one.
changed it. Why did you do that? Oh my gosh.
But, so the other one has 5.
It's in the email, I think, that you were
Yeah.
sent.
Okay.
But yeah, the one that, let me.
I read the email, so.
Student electronic transportation and
That's the one.
self-propelled
That's the one right
transportation.
there.
Is that the only difference?
No,
Oh.
there's a handful. It's
Quite a few different.
What's the subject line of the email, Lisa?
Policies for board meeting?
What are the changes? Because I don't have access to the new one.
Oh, yeah, the title.
Well, if not everyone has a chance to read
I
the
think we
correct one,
should.
should we just
Table it?
have, well, it's first
Well,
reading
this is
anyway.
first reading.
Yeah, first
So
reading.
just
Yeah.
have
First reading.
people send their feedback to the members of the policy committee, by like next Friday.
Yeah, so that
By this Friday.
This Friday.
It
There you
defines
go.
self-propelled
It is next Friday.
better,
Oh,
it has
that's
better
good.
definitions for the
That's what-
motorized, and then it also has,
Rugged.
as part of the PROA district regulations, it
Right.
redefines and adds an extra line item on that one. And I can easily reattach this one right now, so that way the public can view it between now and the next board meeting. But this one is the correct one.
Does the new draft still have the Quail Valley Drive and
No,
Tippy
that's
Drive?
taken out. No,
That's why I requested that.
But it does say all bicycle scooters and self-propelled transportation must come to a complete stop at the stop sign along with obeying all traffic intersection laws adjacent to our property.
I agree with that.
I'll forward that email to the two of you.
Okay, I was just gonna do it, but I don't have Will's email address. I don't know your email address, so.
I think we really need to have input from students on this particular one. Because this is gonna affect
We'll
them.
bring this up at the next.
So your
well,
job.
When would this come up for second reading?
January.
January.
The second week of January.
Second week. So right
Like,
now we're
literally.
planning for January 10th to be the next DSC. I talked to Daryl about that.
That might be like.
That is
So
our
that's
board
is that the
meeting
day right
Or the
after?
day of?
That's the day of our meeting.
Oh.
No, it's the day
January
after.
The day
ninth.
after.
The day after, because we have it on
January
Wednesdays.
ninth.
Oh, gosh.
Okay, sorry.
So,
I feel like with this e-bike policy, because the wrong one was put was swapped out on board docs, that we probably need to maybe
Bring back a
Give
first
it a
reading.
give it a little bit more. So I think we could just set it up for a first reading on the 9th this time.
okay. And so we'll bring that up then at the next
Yeah,
DSC.
I think that's a great idea.
Can I ask on this one though, I see under using bikes and scooters, number 6 says the school resource officer anytime upon reasonable cause. That part, is there any procedure, like if students are not following this, what's the procedure, like what happens?
And right now, with,
Yeah.
yes, and right now, there is no essentially policing entity or admin that goes around and is just enforcing this, right? And that, it really is kind of like an honor system, and only in the instances of overt.
Like somebody's really abusing it, then we can send them this direction.
Correct.
Honestly, they probably have a procedure. They probably have some procedure they follow as police officers,
Yeah,
right?
and
That's what I
they,
assumed.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
city ordinances they just passed
Correct.
about bikes on sidewalks.
and
So
that
maybe we
is-
need to reference that
well,
in the
and
procedure, right?
that section right here is where it says using electronic bikes, all that 41-6, right?
the city.
That is all state law. So it's
Mhm.
already, everything right there is listed in state law.
I wonder if just more broadly when you do traffic training for students, especially with Timpview and the new parking lot and stuff, just like the other day I almost hit a student on a bike on my car because they were coming the wrong way on the road and I was making a right turn and they were coming towards me. And it's just, they had taken that way out of convenience.
Right.
And it's just more broadly like if everyone was doing what they are supposed to do, then that situation would never have happened.
I think some of the elementary schools do have like traffic safety assemblies. So maybe the high schools need to have it.
Or just even like a homeroom thing.
Yeah, bike fair.
Yes, that's
You
it.
go, you registered your bike, you drove around, you had signals.
Yes.
Yeah, me too. Same thing.
You got like a certificate.
Yeah, that's it. We need a high school bike fair.
Yeah.
The cones in the parking lot.
And also if you gave a certificate, I think a lot of students would do it just for a certificate.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
They were doing that in kindergarten every day. We had a whole little track with little bicycles.
So bring this back next time for first reading.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and then I think we have just the TSSA. You already kind of talked about that, so, okay, I think we're good here. Any other questions, comments, or anything? I hope everyone feels good because we're behind, so. All right, so discrimination, harassment, and bullying procedure, we'll give that time to Wendy.
Okay, so I just wanted to give you a report on what had taken place as a result of several complaints that had come in regarding some discrimination, harassment, and bullying allegations at Provo High School in particular. And so our Human Resources Department did a very thorough job in terms of the investigation. There were interviews of students, of various adults present. And so what I want to share with you in this document is just kind of the general findings. And I just want it noted that these are, that this is a situation where I feel like I have kind of failed as a superintendent in the sense that I didn't make sure that these procedures were in place in terms of ensuring that our assistant principals were trained appropriately. I made some assumptions that this training was taking place and it hasn't taken place for a very long time. So we have put in place a lot of remedies for that. So I don't want people to be in any way thinking that our assistant principals are not handling situations appropriately. We are doing a course correction on all of that at this point in time to make sure that that all allegations are handled appropriately from this point forward. So there were some general results that came out of this investigation, which you can read in that document. And then just some specific recommendations that were made by the investigation team. But the part that I really wanted to focus on are the actions that we have decided to take as a district administration. So we have already started the training of the administration teams. We had Deputy Superintendent Jason Cox and Assistant Superintendent Gerald Jensen went to Provo High School and trained with that administrative team in particular to kind of go through what does it look like when we have an allegation coming forward, what are the steps that we take, what questions do we have, and spent a couple of hours just with that specific team. And that was already completed. The same thing was handled with Timpview High School. And then Doug Finch, who is our Assistant Superintendent over Student Services, is going through a reevaluation of our policies 3214 and 3320, which is on discrimination, bullying, harassment, and that's coming to Policy Committee next week on December 18th. And then last week we did do a training of all principals and directors in how to conduct investigations, because we recognize that even how you're interviewing individuals, how we're documenting what, you know, like if something doesn't, if there is no consequence that comes from a particular allegation that is made, why did that happen? It's because you're coming to the conclusion that you can't determine that something did in fact occur at that particular time. You don't have enough evidence. All of that training took place last week. We're training all of the assistant principals and assistant directors, Title I coordinators, and facilitators this week. And then we're talking about really how we want to, what our reporting system is going to look like, because we do use PowerSchool as our way to communicate with the state. So a lot of individuals are recording things in Educator's Handbook and then syncing that with PowerSchool. We just want to make sure that all of that is consistent and that our administrators know what the protocol is and at what point it has to be entered into PowerSchool. Because once it rises to this level, it needs to be reported. It is mandated that it's part of that state reporting process. So we did also, because of the unique nature of the situation at Provo High School, we did talk a lot about that restorative circles and restorative practices are very important, but there are certain instances where they're not appropriate when you're dealing with particular victims in situations. And so really ensuring that our staff is trained in when it's appropriate, when it's not appropriate, and that doesn't replace, for example, say a suspension or other types of consequences that come forward. So we are working on a levels of behavior document that several other districts have, where it really could be a guide for administrators on when these particular situations are happening, what would be the appropriate consequences, how do we run that kind of up the chain of command, and what does that look like. So, and then we have a whole piece of this that is on education. So Meg sat in today as part of our MTSS, where we had our social workers kind of go over a lesson that they were going to do with some of our upper grade elementary students, and we provided some feedback, and they're going to take that back and do some revisions and bring it back to MTSS to really just make sure that we're following state law and providing some skills for students and for teachers to be able to talk about these issues with kids as they're coming up. And then we really do need a comprehensive system to train our employees for how to address these issues. So that's going to start a procurement process, and we've already been talking with a few individuals that are ready to kind of come and present to a smaller committee and then to the larger board to look at, you know, what would be the best way to move forward in this process. So that's just kind of laid out here. So what questions can I answer for you?
In all of this process, will we be using the Safe UT app more robustly, I guess, or would that be kind of part of all this?
Yes, so we have that planned as part of our training with the principals and assistant principals. We just didn't get to it because
I wonder why.
It was really good because people were asking a lot of questions and wanted a lot of clarification. So that's something that we'll follow up with them. But it does concern me that our district is not using the Safe UT app as it should be. So.
Yeah, one more question too about like talking about the consequences, right? Like when the incident does happen and the investigation happens, when you were mentioning consequences, I guess there's some things that do happen that there will be. I'm not explaining this well, Jennifer. I'm kind of trying to speak to what came up in the
yes,
PTA
so
meeting.
the PTA today, when we talked about, first of all, they expressed the desire to have that better training, and we're glad that that was happening, and also that they were impressed that a couple of them had looked at this attachment and that things were already starting, and that most of this will be done within a month or two, at least the initial steps, right? But yes, so one of the parents was just expressing that there have been times where a recent example was a certain principal had found out a student had stolen something off a teacher's desk, and it was basically a, hey, don't do that again. And how are we helping our students learn consequences in life if they don't receive some consequences for certain behaviors now. So how do we train our administrators on when it is appropriate to have those consequences?
So this document that's a levels of behavior will give examples of each of those, and then it talks about the way that it's laid out, the way that Doug's department is kind of presenting this, is it will have, this is what the consequences, so an administrator may suspend or may do in-school suspension or may do a lunch detention or a conference with the student or something. But then there also has to be a piece of where we're reteaching the student, right?
Yeah.
So what types of resources are we providing to the student to help them learn the correct behavior? So are they gonna work with a social worker? Is the counselor gonna work with them? Is it a teacher that's gonna work with them? Who's going to be responsible for that? So that will all be laid out. So we're in the process. It's a hefty document to go through each of those offenses and kind of look at where does this land, and there are a lot of, you know, mitigating circumstances that may end up reducing a particular consequence because maybe somebody has a disability or something, or there might be something that actually aggravates it, that, well, this is the third time this has happened, so now we're going to actually take a much stronger stance against this behavior. So that document is in development, and we're going to work with principals on that. But I just know I was able to operate with a document like that as a high school principal, and it was super helpful to make sure that our team was being really consistent in how we were carrying out consequences for students and the procedures that we were using as we were trying to support students in improving their behavior.
And will that detail also like communication to either parents or whomever has guardianship of any particular students, so that they're partners in that process?
Yeah, so we have even talked about that. One of the pieces that we want to get in place in the next couple of months is that when that gets entered into PowerSchool, that it would auto-generate a parent notification form, and technically under state code, the parent has to be informed, like your child is being suspended, what policy was broken that led to that suspension, and when will the student be allowed back into school, and so there has to be a signature that's tied to that. We've talked also about
it was in the training last week that Jennifer and I went to.
Yeah, and any time really that a student is being spoken to by an administrator, especially if we're gathering information about an investigation.
Suspension.
Yes, you need to call the parent.
Yeah.
So that has, I don't know that has always been the practice. So that was covered quite extensively in the training as to when that needs to take place. So.
The only other question on this is, I think this is great. I love that you're having it scheduled for certain dates. Is this going to be a yearly training, and how often will this be happening?
Yeah, we would need to, I mean, one of the things that we even talked about is just the onboarding of new administrators, right? So we have talked about, we need to have like, there's a refresh that would be kind of a collapsed, almost like just like all of the other trainings that we go through, as educators, and just make that a part of it. But also that we need to do a better job of when we're bringing in new administrators, is there a type of boot camp or something that we could utilize for them to provide them support throughout the course of the year as they're starting off in their administrative careers. We have not had that kind of support in place to deal with especially a lot of the managerial issues.
I wanted to point out that under the recommendations.
Please tell me there's a typo. I'm going to be so happy if there is now.
No, you only used bullet points, but I counted. There's 15 things. I mean, that's a lot.
Yes.
Please make sure, I'm glad that everything is still already underway to make those 15 things happen. And make sure you let us know if we need to increase the budget for something so we can make these things happen.
Thank you.
Okay. I can say one thing. I just want to say that I appreciate the clarity. Like we didn't say, well, there's this problem, but we did. Like it was very much, here are our glaring weaknesses, and here are the 15 recommendations. And so I just want to tell you that I appreciate that
because not that I was worried about it, but there's just been so many times I've gone in and looked at things and I'm like, okay, they're making excuses. I don't feel like, and maybe other people might feel like, but I didn't feel when I read it like we're making excuses. We're just saying, here's what happened, here's the shortcomings, and here's how we need to fix it, and I really appreciate the here's how we need to fix it part as well. Here are the things that need to be done, here are the things that need to be put in place, and so I just wanted to tell you that I appreciated those things.
Just a big shout out to Jason Cox and also Rebecca Rogers, who really helped us with this investigation process and really kind of fine tune where we were going with all of these pieces.
Okay. Okay. We are now going to have a trust lands training, our yearly trust lands training by Jared Seitz.
I'd like to provide an update for you on, just as a reminder, as a Board of Education, there are 2 statutory requirements you have related to administering the land trust program. One is to provide an annual training to school leaders and council chairs and other representatives from each school's council. And secondly, your requirement is to approve plans when they're submitted in the spring. They're submitted in the spring, and typically the time frame for approval occurs before the fall. And so I wanted to provide an update on that. For that annual training, we held that on October 12th of this year. We invited representatives from the State Board of Education, their employees of the Land Trust Administration to come down. And we had representation from every school. Most schools, every school had administration there. The majority of schools had a parent member, whether it was the chair or vice chair of their school community council in attendance. And as part of that training, I've shared with you a copy of the document that we used for that training. It's 43 pages long, and our goal isn't to review that with you tonight, but it's just evidence that we've met that statutory requirement. And in that document, those pages, it really runs down just sort of a general background of the program. It talks about council membership and how each school community council is created and sort of the organization. It talks about elections and what's required on an annual basis. It talks about the responsibilities of key members of the school community councils and talks to them about their overall responsibilities. Another part of that training was to share with them some of the other procedural requirements that they have to have in place because these are subject to public meeting laws. And so talks about the need for rules of order and procedures, talks about also in that training requirements of website postings of information so that members of our community can access that information on each school's individual website. And then it talks through what your plan approval process will look like. And we're not going to talk through that today because I'll mention that here in a moment, but it also in that training talked about the appropriate use of funds, what's an appropriate goal, and then how to deal with carryover or to amend your plan. And so that training occurred over about a 2-hour period on October 12th. And then we provided this exact same document to all of our school community council leadership as well as principals so that they had this to reference. In addition to that, by having Kira Bennett and Holly Kouros come down from the state, they were able to make connections with them so that they can be a resource to answer questions that might come up along the way. Holly and Kira Bennett from the USBE also are in charge of conducting audits across the state of school community council plans, as well as to determine if we're following all the required procedures. And they did that this year across the state, and they chose 3 of our schools at random, and between Assistant Superintendent Jensen and I, we've shared that feedback with those principals. Those adjustments have been made. Additionally, they hired an individual to check the websites. One of the areas of focus for them this past year was to determine what has been on websites. And so I'm going to ask Bonnie if she could share with us pages 21 through 26 of this training. Maybe she's lost it, sounds like. But
I just did it already while you were talking.
Oh, you did? All right, can you bring it back up?
Well, I had a hard time following you.
So
Sorry.
they had somebody go to all of our schools' websites and verify if we had these required website postings. This was the common area of concern that we found in all of our training. And all of our schools have since been given this training, and these requirements have now been met. But Each school is required to have all of these things up in place by the 20th of October every year. In addition to the plan, I mean, you can see these bullet items of what's required. And particularly, we needed to have links to previous years' plans in place so that patrons could see the amount of money that had been designated previously, the goals, and just the overall reports. Go ahead, Bonnie, to the next one. In addition to that, it reminds them that because it's a public meeting, we need to have our agendas and information posted a week prior to council meetings. And it gives them information about what these agendas should look like. Go ahead, Bonnie. It also clarified how long information needs to be stored on websites, and so each school should have up to 3 years of information about school community councils. And the minutes from all of their information should be there for those 3 years. Go ahead, Bonnie. Each school should also have rules of order and procedures of how they'll conduct their meetings. Also talk about how they host or conduct an election. These are the types of things that have to be on the school's websites. Go ahead. So those were the findings of that sort of inspection of all of our schools, and we followed through and provided that additional training. Now the second part of statutory requirement that you have is to approve plans. The time frame for plans to be due is in April, before the first part of May. Under Wendy's leadership right now, we're currently working on a consolidated school improvement plan that would include the general school improvement plan and elements of the school land trust plan. And in a coming day, it would be wise for us to review that with you, because that will be the same document you use to approve the land trust plans moving forward. So that's just basically a report of where we've been. And I wonder if there are any questions that I might be able to answer for the group.
So when you did this training, it was for principals?
Principals, and then chairs and vice chairs were invited from every school community council as well. And annually, we will ensure that we extend that invitation to members of the board so that they can come to that training as well. And I wanted to make sure you had a copy of it just for your reference. As I said, we're not going to go through 43 pages tonight, but I wanted you to be aware of what's in that.
Thank you.
Okay, no other questions?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jared. All right, item number 9, District Improvement Plan Initial Steps. Is for Wendy.
Okay, so go to the, Bonnie, if you'll click on the District Improvement Plan draft, that's probably what we want to pull up. So as an MTSS group, so this includes all of our directors in teaching and learning. It includes student services, like Clay over CTE. We started looking at our school accountability reports and just tried to identify what are our areas of concerns, specifically as it's tied to academics, as well as also some things that we're seeing in terms of behaviors or student wellness. And there's a lot, right? So this just kind of became a dumping form where we put down, we just wanted to assess where we are, right? We just really need to look at our reality and say, what is it that we're really struggling with? And really, as we started to look at our goals, we want to develop these goals really with the support of research and assessment with Nate Mitchell, and talking with him. He hates percentages as part of goals because he really wants it to be tied to individual students. So he wants to tell teachers, okay, if you have this many students, then you need to identify the 3 more students that you're going to have that are going to be more successful this year, which I really appreciate. He's trying to create that real accountability, and I'm putting a name, and a face to this number. And so that's something that we need to work through. What you're overall noticing is that our goal is that we should be well above the state average, and we're just sitting at the state average or sometimes below the state average, and that just doesn't feel very happy to me. So part of this then is kind of identifying what is it that we have started to work on, or what is already in place that we really need to hone in on and identify as being our areas of focus. And PLCs is a major area of focus. We know that if teachers are given time to lesson plan deliberately, it concerns me if teachers are telling us that they're winging it. Like, everybody knows that sometimes we're winging it, but that deliberate form of lesson planning and being able to work with other teachers that are teaching the same subject or the same grade level to really improve that Tier 1 instruction becomes really important. For them to use data, and not just data that's given to them at the end of the year, but being able to figure out, how do I make a common formative assessment across our grade level team or across our subject area, and how can I determine if our students are meeting those standards? What does that exactly look like? And so really refining that PLC process, I think, is going to be really key. And right now we're getting teachers to meet and to make sure that they understand that this is an expectation, and then we just got to keep ratcheting that piece up.
One question I had on this, I noticed often, well, first of all, I think it's amazing. All of this is why I just am so excited about being here, right? I think everything we do should be to help us do some of these things that are right here. When you talk about insistence on use of district adopted curriculum and strategies as one of your tools, I guess my question is, in that PLC process and in the system that you developed to support these goals, I would love to see a piece that says, and here's the feedback loop from teachers back to you on that curriculum along the way. Because it may be that as a group of teachers, we're like, well, we're trying to implement this thing, and we're trying to do, we hear this word insistence, so okay, we're trying this, but the thing I was doing before I felt worked better, or like, where's the place to just share that and not have it feel like it's adversarial, right? Like, this curriculum isn't quite giving me the tools that I like to have, and so that way they're not feeling like they need to either be in compliance or out of compliance, but rather they're partners collaborating around the curriculum and whether or not our chosen curriculums really are supporting this kind of improvement and growth.
Yesterday, I don't know, all the days are blending together, but
last day.
But whatever the last day was, I think, Assistant Superintendent Jensen brought up the fact that really the most important person in terms of generating better student outcomes is the teacher in the classroom, right? So his suggestion was, well, we're talking about having a portrait of a graduate, why are we not having a portrait of a teacher? Like, these are the expectations that we have for what a teacher should be doing in a classroom, and this is what a high-performing teacher does, and this is how they are able to get those kinds of results. And we can, and can we observe that, and can we provide specific feedback to teachers, and can we train them in those specific things? And absolutely, we think that we can. And then the second most important person that research shows is the principal, is the building leader. And so then that individual, what does the portrait of that individual look like? And we had a rich conversation yesterday about how much time do our principals get to spend really examining the academic pieces of the improvement of their school. It's not a lot of time because there are all of these other things that they're managing. So our job as a district is to try to find a way to free up that time so that they really can be an instructional leader. I really believe all of our principals want to be instructional leaders. I believe that our teachers really want to be embedded and delve into that rich instruction. It's just, there's a behavior, there's this, I've got to turn in this progress report, I got to do this. So what are some things that we can do to break those barriers down, to make that more manageable for a teacher and for a principal, in fact. So we just really kind of honed in on, PLCs. I know that I also think there's a lot to be said about assessment capable learners. That's all the research that's coming from Nancy Fry and Doug Fisher. I know a lot of our schools are doing a lot with learning targets and success criteria, but there's other components of that where a student is really able to see where they are in the continuum of learning. What does that look like? What does specific feedback look like? Is that reasonable? You know, how do we make that reasonable? In the day of AI, we should be able to provide some really great specific feedback for students very quickly. And trying to help in those ways to keep all of that training intact. So that isn't something that's new. This district has been very involved in that. So just continuing with that, beefing that up, continuing the PLC discussion. And then I think the other pieces that are part of this are really about making sure that we are using the curriculum and that we don't just think that, well, I taught this 20 years ago, so this is, maybe you did, and maybe it was awesome, and maybe it still is working, but that's where that feedback loop would come in, right? But I also do know that students are very different now in many cases. So I think that would be a very important piece as well. And I think the AVID piece of this really comes in as a mindset, particularly for our secondary schools. That AVID mindset is really about figuring out what kids are going to be doing after they graduate from high school, and how do we make sure they have those skills? How do we make sure that those opportunities are not withheld from them because they're just not aware of what exists out there and they haven't done the right preparation for that. So I think there's a lot of restructuring that could happen with AVID to really accentuate that, especially since a lot of our school report card data show that we're not having quite the success with our advanced coursework that we should. We emphasize a lot with AP. We need to probably be doing a lot more with concurrent enrollment and offering that as an option, as well as significant CTE pathways, and really beefing up those options as well. So these are just, so now the next steps of this, basically what we need to do is, you're noticing there's a lot of repetition, like there's a lot of the same, you know, this low achievement here is requiring this action here. So we need to go in and refine that, because this would be overwhelming to any teacher or any principal to be like, I have to do 19 things, no way, peace out, I'm not doing that. And so it's about saying, what are the 3 things that we feel like are the things that are going to be able to result in those student outcomes the way that we need our numbers to move, right, and our students to have those skills, and then really lay that out. But this has to go out to principals, this needs to go out to their school leadership teams, so that we can get feedback on what supports do they need to do this. And one of the pieces that I think becomes really important is, when you start laying this out, then what are the teacher expectations? Yes. But what can they expect from district leadership? What can they expect from principals? What do we expect from counselors? What do we expect from parents? What do we expect from the students? And every single component has to come together to make that happen. So just really trying to be deliberate in this process. We've had some really great conversations over the last few weeks surrounding this. So that's this part. Do you have any questions about this?
That was going to be my question, like how are you going to prioritize this? But you just said that,
Yes.
so that's
okay.
perfect.
Good.
Yes. I was like, this
there's
is
just
a lot.
there's just a little too much.
I mean,
there.
it's all great. No, it's fabulous, but like no one person can do all of that at one time, right? So.
And then we had talked about also identify schools that are more impacted, and how do we make sure that we're providing those resources. And so we kind of have a draft that we shared that kind of talks about what those supports would look like and what those identification factors would be. And then the spreadsheet that I shared with you is really just some of the things that we're looking at with regard to FTEs. So we had a great conversation in cabinet was that yesterday, Derek? I don't even
Yeah.
know anymore. Where we're looking at how do we collaborate as an entire leadership team and say, okay, this is what your FTE will be this is what your student population generates in terms of FTE, but now we know that there's all of these challenges that your school has, and being able to quantify that and kind of put a number to that so that we can be transparent as to why this school got more FTE to help facilitate these students and to get them caught up, or because there's more multilingual students. And then we can start to identify what budgets we would use to pay for that additional personnel. So Derek and his team, and really it is a team effort, because it's going to be Derek and Devin and Jason and Jared and Daryl that are going to sit down and start doing some models of this to see what this actually looks like, so that we can make sure that we're getting the resources to the schools in the way that we need to, with the funding sources that we have. So
the two schools I didn't see on that was East Bay Coast High and Slate Mountain. Would they be included, or how does that work?
yes, they also are funded through so many additional pots of money that we just almost have to deal with that on a completely separate situation there. So
And the challenge, kind of what Wendy's really talking about is with, say, East Bay Coast High, is that you may have a new student that comes in, or Slate Mountain that comes in, that would blow up completely whatever way we're staffing it, just due to the level of services that new student would get. So really, as every student comes on board in those departments, it really requires almost a case-by-case analysis of how much workload is being added.
And just determine what they need. So that just entails that we need to build in enough, and Derek's really helped us out with this in terms of our budget, where we've had to come and say we've got to have more support in this particular area and figuring that piece out and what that looks like. So we should have some models of what that looks like. We have started to share out kind of this FTE format. All of the numbers, by the way, Michelle Eldridge did a great job of kind of creating that spreadsheet. Those numbers we can adjust in terms of, like, we can take categories out, we can add categories in that aren't part of that if we feel like that there are things that are being missed. You notice that she is like, do we want to take into account, say, for example, the number of DCFS referrals? That might have an impact on, say, how many social workers a school should have. Maybe that should be counted towards, maybe a school needs 1.5 social workers or 2 social workers as a result of that. She just wasn't sure how to pull that particular data, but that would be something that we would come together as a cabinet and work through. So those are some of those pieces.
Yeah,
Yes.
I have 2 questions. One was, I do think when we're running a DLI school that there's a different set of demand and need to support that program if we're really running it.
Yep.
And I didn't see that accounted for here, but I feel like that would weigh. It might at least impact how many FTEs you need to run that program, depending on how.
Absolutely, and we actually talked about that. I know that Daryl had talked about in a. He said we need to actually look at programmatic needs, and sometimes if I need to have a balance here, or maybe I am going to carry an AP chemistry class of only 8 students because I'm starting that program, or because I don't want that program to die, right? It's a really important college level program. We're going to run it this year with the idea that next year we might have 15, and then the next year there might be 30, and we're going to continue to grow that. We have to look at DLI in a very similar way, so it would allow us to do that. The other piece of this then is for our schools to be able to start, so once we're identifying those key areas and as our strategic plan starts to come together, then I really wanted to have a school improvement plan that's moving in a much more rapid way. I feel like sometimes the school improvement plans are coming online like in September, and I just feel like that's super late as you're trying to plan for where you need teachers and assistant principals and those kinds of things. So we put together, and this was our school leadership team, Michelle, Anne Marie, put together a school plan template that really allows us, because we have trust lands plans, we have school improvement plans, we have Title I plans, put it all in a centralized place and then identify the funding sources to help support that. And we're actually going to start rolling this out in January. So we're going to bring all of our principals and we're going to have coaches there as well as their supervisors, and looking at their data to say, okay, this is what your goal was for this year, this is where you're currently sitting. What is that going to look like? If we're going to really have this trajectory of we really want to be well above the state average within 5 to 7 years, what is that going to look like, and what will that entail? And so just start with that planning process, and then they can just copy and paste that straight into the Title I plans and into the trust land template and whatnot that they need for that. So we're accelerating that timeline, so that's why I included that timeline also as part of those documents, to really try to have their planning kind of in place for the following school year, really by spring break, so that if there are needs that they have that we need to come to the board with, we can do that before the start of school the following year. It allows us to have our leadership institutes at the end of May and in June, to really focus on what our priorities are as a district, and we're not just making it up as we go, but it's very intentional in that process.
All right. One thing I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Could be concerned as is that this is being put on to teachers instead of including them in this so they understand what's actually happening.
So explain to me what parts are you most concerned about?
I don't know, because every teacher's going to be different. They're going to read it and go, I have to do what?
Well, and
You're making me do
you're
what?
right. Yeah, so I think the issue is that we have to say what are the goals that we need to set, and then what are our expectations. And to be quite honest, we've just got to have the best teachers in front of our kids. The bottom line is we have to be giving our kids the very best instruction, and then whatever that takes to help our teachers get to that point where they have that skill set to be able to do that. And if that means we need more supports for behaviors because we're seeing those kinds of behaviors in place, that's why we're also talking about a continuum of services for behaviors so that we can support schools more effectively in that way as well. Like, there are so many components that are part of this, but the bottom line is I've got to have a fantastic teacher that is standing, with kids, working with them and challenging them and getting them to just be the best they can be.
Well, I think in conjunction with that, you did discuss, right, what are the expectations then of the district counselors,
Yes.
right? So these are the expectations, but we're here to support you,
Yes.
right? And that's part of this whole picture, which I appreciate, and I think that can maybe help with that feeling of doing this to you, but not like leaving you on your own. We're restructuring district-wide too, so that we are supporting better.
It's going to be messaging. I mean, really, that's going to be, we have to message it correctly.
And deliver. It's
Yeah.
it's not just about messaging, right? It's also, we have to deliver.
What I was going to say is, what I heard you saying is, you're not just going to throw this template at the principals, you're bringing them in, let's sit down together, here's, okay, how you're going to plug in the first part, and you're guiding them through it, which I really appreciate that support, that we are doing this together, so thank you.
Our schools are not in the situation that they're in because it's not our teacher's fault, it's not our principal's fault, we just have not had a consistent effort that's been deliberate and intentional and helpful, and we just need to move it in that direction because we have the right people that can do incredible things in this district. So.
Okay, Lisa, how do you want to consider Gina?
Okay, just real quick, I was just going to say, again, culturally, I think this is happening, but I just want to reiterate how powerful I think it is when we're asking for feedback. So, you know, as we're doing these trainings with teachers, if teachers are overwhelmingly saying, okay, but here is a way that would be easier, like that we're flexible and willing to say, okay, let's change our form then. Okay, I hear enough of you saying this isn't going to serve you in the way you need it to. Let's make sure the tool is actually just a tool for you. You know what I mean?
Right.
So.
Absolutely.
No, I just could express appreciation. My process brain is very appreciative of all of it.
Thank you. Absolutely. Okay, any further questions or comments on this? Okay, item number 10, we'll hear from Jared Seitz about the announcement of the new assistant principal.
Well, this afternoon, we actually introduced Lance Vandermark as the assistant principal at Franklin Elementary. Met with the faculty briefly after school today. In addition to that, with those CSI funds, we've also extended an offer to instructional coach. The offer was made this afternoon. We still haven't notified the other individuals, and so that won't be publicized probably for another day or so. We're excited to have Lance there. We're working with the administration at Sunset View now to sort of deal with that domino effect that happens when you hire from within. But we're excited at the opportunity and the direction that the school can take.
When are we looking at having, when is he going to start at Franklin?
On the 18th, so this upcoming Monday we'll begin. They'll likely have a little footprint back at Sunset View for a period of time, just until we can determine
Find
how to
his
navigate.
replacement?
What's that?
Find his replacement?
That's correct. So, or find it.
It's hard to find Francis replacement.
Yeah, we just don't want to play the domino.
He is
game.
wonderful, and I'm really glad.
We're excited for that, and thank you for the approval of that opportunity.
Thank you. Okay, we'll now have a quick update on the strategic plan.
I sent calendar.
Oh, I apologize. I skipped something. I was getting ahead of myself. I thought, well, we're really catching up, but
No, not yet.
All right, Jason.
All right, good evening. It's that time of year where we get to talk about calendars again. We're really excited about that.
Yay. Woo!
All right. Well, we ran our typical process this year where we sent out 7 things asking the community to kind of prioritize those 7 different ways in which they wanted us to build the calendar. And then after getting back that information through surveys, we sent out 2 options for survey in the survey to see where the community and the employees landed on which they suggested that they would like to have us adopt. So we are tonight recommending calendar A. It was the winner in all groups. It was a little bit closer in the parent group than it was in the employee group, but it was it won out in both areas. So, and calendar A starts on the 12th of August on the in the 25-26 school year, and ends
early.
Actually, I didn't vote for that one.
and ends May 22nd before Memorial Day.
Wowza.
Yeah.
I feel like because of how the vote went with the community vote, I need to remind everyone what happened last time school ended after Memorial Day. So when I was in high school, the board accommodated the community and said, okay, we will do one school year after
You mean one
what
day?
people wanted was for school to start after BYU education. So they did that for 1 year. And it was a disaster and everybody hated it because school ended after Memorial Day. So, just a reminder, that was my brother's senior year and everybody hated it. And it's better to have school end before Memorial Day.
I worry with the pattern we set, if we were to have that 1 week after, that so many people would just not show up that last week because they're in that habit, right?
Yeah, I actually did it in our work in another school district, which did exactly the same thing that Terry's talking about, where they did all of a sudden move it to being after Memorial Day, and what you just mentioned was exactly what occurred. They had very, very little attendance that last week. So.
I always went to school till mid-June.
Same. I got
And you always started after
But
Labor
it's
Day.
the pattern,
If
right?
you started
The pattern
before
of the
Labor Day,
community.
none of us would have come because
Yeah.
it was
Right,
still summer.
It's not the
Yeah.
tradition, right?
So-
Tradition either way, yeah. Okay.
I can't take it over.
Hi, Jason.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jason.
I don't know if this feedback is more for you or for the communications team, but I just received some feedback as people were filling out the survey. It would be really helpful to have some description about what is the difference between the 2 calendars,
Hard to kind of see.
right?
Go back and
And
forth
some
between
of
the
the
2.
impacts, like this also means the semester before Christmas or after Christmas, right? So,
Yeah, that's great
so that they're
feedback.
not, it can be hard for them to, did I miss anything or what the difference is?
Yeah,
Or-
so writing up those things as a clarifier for
Mhm.
people to be able to read through as to why A is different from B. So I'll work with Caleb on
Yeah,
that.
I talked with them about that last week too.
Okay.
One thing specifically with the proposed A is, you're right, the semester does end before winter break. I have to say that as a high school student, that is definitely,
That's a big deal.
yeah, that
Good?
especially
Oh, yeah.
currently, since
Oh,
our
yeah.
our current semester ends after winter break this year. The amount of complaints I've heard from students, just in general, complaining that there's an extra little 2 weeks after winter break of this term. I think having it before winter break is absolutely essential. So
Well, and
let's
some
go
teachers
calendar
are
A.
saying you can't do any makeup whatever's after Christmas, even though there is
Even
time
those
after
2 weeks.
Christmas. Do you know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
then that feels to some students. I've
Yeah.
heard from a parent about that
Right, the
this
other
week.
part that we fall
So-
into trouble with is
Sorry,
the,
Wendy.
is the balance of the actual calendar, the balance of the days in the semesters. And so some years it falls where we can propose it being before winter break. But in all honesty, there's certain years where we can't because the balance is just out, and this happens to be one of those years. So we've gone back and forth between that based on whether or not the year would allow us to do it, you know, where the days fell in the school year, so.
Thank you.
I just know that was the best part about becoming a college student was you ended before Christmas break.
All right, do you have something to say, Mike?
No, actually, I did.
You're just waving. You're just saying hello. All
I
right.
can't on camera, me too. I was like, took it out the truck, I'm like, maybe I think I was saying I want
You're
one.
saying you want the
It's really good.
I took one before, before I said that. All right, thank you. Okay, everybody fill up on chocolate as we move to our next item. Thank you, Jason, very much.
Yes, please.
Item number 12, which is a strategic plan update, and also, it's 6:42, we do need to start our business meeting at 7, so if we still have a few items left, there is possibility I may table some, and we will just work on those after public input in the next meeting if it takes too long, but let's keep going and see what we can do.
All I was gonna say is, do any of you have any questions on the strategic plan update that I provided? Or do you, Rebecca, you and Lisa want to provide any input? I thought the whole conversation was quite interesting at the steering committee because it was all about we hate the word greatness and we it was fascinating. So
A lot of word debate.
yes.
Any questions for Wendy on the strategic plan
I'm
update?
good.
You bet.
On the, towards the end, it has like the data review.
Yeah,
We did not
we
get
didn't
to
get to
that.
that.
Okay.
So we're gonna do that in our next meeting.
What, and the very first, so it's slide 33, it says, demographics by population and then it goes all the data. One thing I don't see on any of the data is the graduation rates and then graduation rates by student groups. And I don't know if we've ever done it by student group.
Yeah, we can pull.
I think we had a school district-wide graduation rate.
Yeah, but I think someone's asked me about that before.
That's one thing I don't see and I would like to know that.
That's great. I appreciate that, thank you.
Okay, we're officially only 6 minutes behind now, we'll go back.
Wow.
We're catching up, guys. Go back to Jason Cox with an East Bay Post-High update.
Okay, thank you again for this minute to talk about East Bay Post-High. So from year to year with our Post-High program, we're not exactly sure how many students will be there based on the number of students with disabilities that would qualify for it. So this year we actually have a very large number of students there. Typically we're in the low 20s. This year we're over 30. We're 33 students that are there. And because of that, it's made the space at the building very tight. The principal there met with us parent group, and they talked about how they have concerns about the space. A lot of the time during the day, the students are going out to different work opportunities, but still, there is time when they're at the building, and like I said, it is very tight. So we've explored the option of being able to move into the second half of the building, since the building is kind of split into two pieces, And we were going to come tonight with a recommendation of us moving into that second half, but we haven't quite gotten all the information back from the landowner. We met with them, we did a walkthrough with them, the space will work for us, they want us to be able to work with them on rent and that type of thing, but we haven't gotten the agreement back. So once we get the agreement, we would love to have you support us in moving into giving them a little bit more space to work in at East Bay Post High.
Is this a long-term lease that we're looking at?
So it's actually month to month, but we're looking at doing it for probably 2 to 3 years based on our strategic plan and looking at how we'll do with space needs in the near future. Yeah.
Okay. We'll look forward to that then. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, guys, we are officially 1 minute early.
Yes.
All
Good job,
right.
Jason.
Large purchase request, Derek. You get 5 minutes, so you
6
better take
minutes.
only 5.
It's like, let me take a
What you have before you is a large purchase request for the Centennial Auditorium lighting and sound system. So the total cost of this is $230,000.
226.
Is that what it was? I got the second half of it today. So
Let me see a base project that maybe I'm not looking at.
226, yeah,
Performance audio.
16
There it is.
and 3 cents. And so that budget would come out of the capital budget. So we're asking the board to approve that so we can move forward and get that done.
I would have to say that my daughter was in that school 2 years ago, and it was really difficult. Like, the sound was going in and out from, like, for musicals, and it was just, you know, you just felt so bad for these kids who worked so hard and you couldn't hear it, and so it definitely needs an upgrade.
When I was at Centennial, I ran the tech crew, so I helped run sound and lights. The equipment was very old when I was there, and
It goes back to just maintaining your facilities, right?
Yeah.
If you maintain them properly, then you get a longer use life out of them. So this is part of that maintaining of the facilities to where we're trying to maximize the longevity and the use of that facility.
I'm just curious, in a purchase like this, I mean, who's consulted to know that we are getting a good quality product that's gonna work well for our building? If we spend the money, that we're doing it right.
So I'd have to go back and have Kyle get some input, but normally when we do this, because of the threshold, we can go through bids and get a bid process to determine, you know, what, the lighting. So our maintenance department typically is the one that is the team who is knowing what lighting that we need that integrates with our facilities. In terms of a sound system, I would have to defer on that one. Did they get input from the school, or was this something that was recommended based off of architects or something like that?
Yeah, and also, I don't know if anyone at the school specializes in audio equipment, but there's a big difference in different kinds of audio equipment, and I have seen in the past a school purchase a sound system and then seen someone who I know cares a lot about sound systems weigh in after the purchase, like, why would they choose that? Everyone knows those are not quality, whatever. So I just wonder if it would be helpful. I mean, obviously we're not looking for the most expensive whatever, but just to make sure that the components we buy or the brands that we buy are actually gonna do their job well.
And I'll need to actually amend, is that Kyle's team is the one that's putting this all together because they're facilitating, but the audio components were brought forward by technology.
Great.
So our technology department is the one that actually is the recommending.
Well, and I'm not, I love Kyle, that wasn't trying to, sorry.
Yeah, I'm not
Okay.
trying
Sorry,
to.
Danica, but I just
don't wanna micromanage, just
mistakenly
wanna make sure we
offended.
don't miss
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
right?
That we have to replace the skin in 2 years.
Right.
Or that we
Yeah,
buy it
because
and it's just not high quality.
And if I remember right, this is part of the capital facilities project, one of the projects that we had already.
This was one that was discussed 2 years ago.
Okay.
Because when I started there was a lot of discussion about doing this, and it's just now getting to the point of.
Okay, any other questions?
I did. So the Centennial roof is going to be replaced this summer. What's the plan, the schedule for this and the roof getting
So
replaced?
this is already in process. They've already been in there working on it. The roof will be done after school is out, so that way there's no disruption as part of school. So that way they'll come in over the summer, replace the roof, and it is done. This, I believe, they're already in process of it because they don't have students in the auditorium day
There's
all
no
day long.
play going on.
Correct.
It'll be fixed by the time the next play
Correct,
happens.
yes.
Great. Thank you so much, Derek. All right. Really quickly, I'm going to hit item 16. It's going to take 30 seconds. Our upcoming calendar items, there's 2, which is awesome.
Actually,
Winter break, study session on January 9th, and what's the third one?
USBA.
USBA. Okay, it's not on there. I don't see it on here, but yes, that's coming up on the 5th and 6th, or 4th, 5th, and 6th.
4th through 6th.
Okay, 4th through 6th of January. Okay. So then let's go back to item number 15, consent calendar. Any questions on the consent calendar today?
I do.
Okay, Terry.
What, the VAR technology content keeper,
Yes.
what is that? I vaguely remember, I think
It's a
I've heard
filter.
it.
It's a filter.
Okay, it's a filter from
Web
the chat?
filter.
Web filter, yeah.
Filters out like
all school Chromebooks.
yeah,
have it.
websites.
Oh, okay.
Feel like these kids know about it.
Yeah,
Oh,
no.
trust me.
Yeah,
CK Express. I can't tell you how many
CK
times
Express is-
hasn't let me get into
I
my
think
school
it.
at 10 p.m.
Last week during Principal Street.
After
I was
midnight,
like,
it blocks
it's
all
so
access.
Yeah.
From midnight to 5, I'm not allowed to use my school Chromebook. Yeah.
Sometimes it'll show up randomly, even if I don't.
That's
clear
also,
my,
yeah,
like,
if you
regular
have too many
Wi-Fi and
tabs, it just like dies inside and blocks everything, so.
stuff. Anyway.
Well, it's working. We know it's working.
It's maybe working too well.
It's a good purchase.
Worth the $60,000 we paid for.
All right. Any other questions, Terry?
I have one.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, we had 2 charges on the same data audio enhancement for a lot of money each that would, if they were combined, it would be over our $50,000. So I just wanted to know, were those like from past times and they just happened to process them on the same day, or what they are, if you know, I don't know. It just flagged.
Was this on the warrant?
Yeah, sorry, I don't know, I wrote it in my notes, consent calendar notes, so.
There are 2 different, one's on the 8th of
On the
November.
8th, November 8th.
And on the 29th.
No, there's,
I'll have to look into those.
I
Thank
see
you.
one on
There's
the
2 on
8th
the
and
8th.
one on the 29th.
oh, is it, maybe I wrote it
They're,
down wrong
they're
then.
different. They're different on different dates.
Oh, I see. Then it's on.
But,
I read
but
it
still,
incorrectly.
depending on, because of how close it is, I can look into it because it does say the 8th and then the 29th. It could easily be essentially a split purchase.
Okay.
Depending on where it was ordered, who it was ordered, what the projects were. I can look into it to see if that was one of those things. So.
Any other questions? All right. Then we have officially 7 minutes until we start our business meeting. So is there a motion to adjourn our study session?
I moved to adjourn.
Okay, we are adjourned. We'll start up again in 7 minutes in PDC. I know,
Full
I'm so,
7
we went
minutes.
way behind.
What a comeback.
Right, slashed in front. What is it?
I work on Monday, so I won't be able to do
It's like
all.
40 minutes.
So what I'll do, I'll keep it out,
Yeah.
write the changes we talked about
under
here,
some
based
small
on
things.
these,